Kristie Randolph. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for jumping on. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a little while now, since we got introduced.
Me as
Um,
well. I know the first time we tried this, I was actually involved in a situation and could not get away and had to postpone to tonight.
that's quite right. Totally understand. Kristie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am from Henderson, Kentucky. If you don't know where that's at, I am across the river from Evansville, Indiana. And if you cannot tell Kentucky accent, that's how everyone knows where I'm from. I grew up here, with the exception of maybe a year and a half. Was married to somebody, met and married somebody from Mason City, Iowa. I loved it up there. It was just one of those things that you love being there, you love the people, but you just wasn't good with who you were married to. Nothing, nothing bad or anything like that. It was just one of those things that just didn't work out. So I came here and I ended up getting married. I have four kids, and I have I had two degrees. I had an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree. And then what we'll go into talking about later, you'll understand how I became a domestic violence advocate, community and courtroom advocate. So I have some social work experience there and some other advocacy work, and I'll explain how that came to be and all of that. And that way, if somebody has any questions or they don't understand, then I'll explain a little bit more.
Awesome. What are your degrees in?
The first one's in accounting, which, I don't know why. Honestly, I was actually originally going to school to do cosmetology. And then for whatever reason, at the last minute, I flipped, which is completely opposite of each other. My second one it's a bachelor's degree in business management. And then was almost close to a psychology and sociology degree as well, which now I have flipped it into the social work as well. So that's kind of how. So I have all these degrees, but sometimes degrees don't compare to personal life experiences.
Totally agree. I have two degrees myself. I have an associate's and a bachelor's, and they're both in occupational health and safety, which is nothing at
Yeah,
all what I wanted to do, but
right.
they've played out and they've been helpful. So you said you grew up in Iowa, is that correct?
No, I grew up in
Oh,
Henderson, Kentucky. For
okay.
about a year and a half, I was in Mason City, Iowa. And Mason City is the town right next to Cedar Rapids that actually has the ice houses that you see in the movie, like Grumpy Old Men, where they're fishing. And I was
Mhm.
about
Yeah.
45 minutes from Albert Lee, Minnesota. And talk about cold. Uh, I love snow and ice now, and I think that played a part of why I did, because I was there. Because you do not call in sick in Iowa and say you can't get to work, because they will come get you. Doesn't matter if it's whiteout conditions, they will come get you. And I liked being there and who I was married to at the time. I don't have any ill will towards him and he doesn't me. It was just one of those things. I was about 5 years older, so I had already done some things, and then he hadn't, and he had a child, and I did not have children at the time. And it was just one of those things that was, really great. We had fun, and then it was like reality set in, and I missed being here. And I still have friendships there and people I know. So it wasn't, you know, something came out of it. I met the people I did, and I had a great time, and I don't have any ill will. And his parents were really awesome to me. It was just I needed to be here, and he had to be there, and maybe at a later time in life.
Sure. What did you before you started this organization? What did you do for a living?
Well, I owned a carpet cleaning, painting business, putting some of that business degree together. Um, we were very successful, and anybody that knows, when you're self-employed, you work three times as hard as somebody that has a normal job, because you have to have people that believe in you, believe that you can do the work. And we were, and that's what we were doing actually when Chloe's murder happened. And once that did, and you'll understand a little bit why I left doing that and how I ended up where I'm at. It wasn't that I disliked what we did. made a great living at it. It was just sometimes when you realize things happen, um, your direction in life and where you want to go changes.
You mentioned you have 4 kids. What are your how old are your kids?
Chloe was the oldest, so she is 26. Jason is 25. Breton is 21. John Michael is 18. Now, there's one after John Michael that is actually Chloe's son that I have adopted. His name is Slim, and he will be 7 this coming Saturday, not tomorrow, but the 14th. And he right now is 6 going on 40 in his next midlife crisis. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Midlife crisis, huh?
Midlife crisis. Yes. Yes. And he's very outspoken. And if you knew his mother, um, but if you knew me, but then you knew his mother, then you would know how he's very outspoken. I mean, he doesn't miss a beat. He will tell you quickly.
That's awesome. Were your kids ever in any sports or anything?
Chloe was. Chloe was the softball player. She was actually the catcher, and she loved it. She just didn't want to travel. She didn't want to do travel ball. And then 2 of my sons, Jason and Brecken, they played summer ball. They just, after that first year, because you're either really competitive or you just want to play it for fun. And they didn't want to play competitive. And then my youngest son, John Michael, he attempted to play football, and on his first not tryout, but his first time practicing, he got a concussion, and that was the end of his sports endeavor. Now, Slim, um, I I've asked him, does he want to play anything? And I'm not going to force my kids. I'm not going to be that parent that you force your kids and you're the one over there competing with the next parent and they're out there miserable and they're out there like, look at my parents. No, that's not me.
Yeah, I've got a 6-year-old that actually turned 7 in November, and kind of the same story. He started ice skating when he was about, I'd say about 2, almost 3. Uh, we have a very good friend of ours who used to play hockey professionally. So Keegan, our child, he always wanted to do that as well, and so he did a few years of ice skating, and then came time for hockey practice. First time trying hockey, and he was like, "Nope, not doing this." He was playing soccer also. Said, "Nope, not doing that anymore either." So I get it. We don't force him either. We would like him to do something, be a little bit active, but
Right. I mean, you want your kid to show up and have fun and play, not that you're dragging them to whatever sport and then they're crying and yelling and screaming, and you as the parent is acting a complete fool just because you want your kid to be like the next door neighbor. No, that's okay. That's okay.
so let's kind of jump in, talk about Chloe a little bit. What was life for her? What was life like for her growing up?
Well, Chloe was the oldest, and so she was her brother's keeper. She really was. She was the I may not like my brother today, and I may not want to be around him, and I can't stand him, but you didn't mess with her brothers. You just didn't. And she was more the ambitious one because she graduated a year and a half early. She came home at Christmas break and said, "I want to go to homeschooling." And we thought that somebody was potentially maybe bullying her, something else had happened, and she's like, "No." Because they had changed schooling where everybody was in the same classroom. So if you learned at a slower pace, you were in there, and it wasn't fair to that child either, or the children that kept going faster. And she's like, I just, you spend 10 minutes of your classroom trying to get the class under control. The teacher maybe taught for 10 or 15 minutes, and then the rest of the time was just wild. And so she had to complete the beginning of her junior year, do junior and senior year. And she did that in about 5 months. She was my disciplined one where she still got up at 6:30 in the morning. She had all that work done by 10 o'clock. I mean, she could work ahead at whatever pace. And then Chloe was the one that was an advocate herself. She spoke out for anybody that she felt like was being wronged. Perfect example. She's in high school in a classroom, and you have students that are like, I don't understand. I can't keep up. Or somebody says, she was the first one. And believe me, she didn't hold back at all. She was, if there was ever a mini me version, that was her. And there were so many times I had to pull the reins back. I'm like, dang, like she's like, but you wouldn't have. And I'm like, I'm being a hypocrite if I tell you not to say what I would say, but you're just at a heightened level. So she was my strong, independent, stand your ground, stand down for no one. If you have something to say, I got a rebuttal back. And we had a lot of fun. She kept me like, she would talk about song like, um, I know I'm going to say it wrong. Malachi Black, maybe. I don't know. No, that's a wrestler. I don't know. It was an artist. And so she would teach me songs like, I knew I was old. I knew I had advanced past or whatever. And I would tear up my phone at least once a week. And so she kept me, I still do. I feel young at heart, but she always kept me young at heart by teaching me like new things or whatever. And I was her mother and I kept her grounded and I kept her, on track. But she was the flip side of that of, she kept me grounded too. And she was sassy and outspoken and we had fun. And I'm glad she was who she was. And I will never regret her being that way and me teaching her that you don't take nothing from anybody and your opinion
That's
matters.
awesome. So I guess let's just go ahead and jump into the story. I guess just kind of let you take it over, and I
Um,
may interrupt you and ask some
okay.
questions from time to time.
Um, Chloe always dated outside of her race. And, being in Henderson, Kentucky, I told her, I love all my kids unconditionally. You know, Race, religion, that doesn't, no, we don't see that. If you have a sexual preference, whatever, I love my kids unconditionally. And Chloe always seen the best in everybody. And she ended up meeting an individual that was not from the United States, had came over here to Owensboro, Kentucky. And Owensboro from Henderson is about 20 minutes or so. And they had this deal with the college over there that they took refugees in. And so the individual I'm speaking of was from Somalia. And his brother and sister was already here. And how they met was she had a friend and unfortunately, that friend I didn't particularly like because I've taught all my children you can have friendships in life and you can have more than they got and it can be up and down, but a friendship is equal. It's not about what they gave you, what you gave them, money, statue, whatever. It's about that equal friendship that they're there, good times, bad times, ugly times, whatever. And that individual, to me, in my opinion alone, wasn't that way. But that individual was dating the brother and that's how Chloe met this individual. And we had already gone through she had previous boyfriends that were outside of her race. So, that factor was okay. And, but now you've added in not only is he outside of your race, he's outside of your culture. And the culture was sometimes, depending on the discipline, a very hard culture. And they believed certain things about women. Women were beneath them. They did certain things. And so I needed her to understand that, people are used to you dating outside of your race, but now you've added another element. So she meets this individual because of her friend who was dating the brother. Now, the brother and Chloe were actually really good friends, and they had conversations more so than the individual she got with. So the relationship kind of went really quickly in the fact that she meets him in the end of April, 1st of May. They end up moving in together the end of July into a place that was actually my mother's. And my mother had gotten dementia and we had to put her in a facility. And I had kept that. And that was kind of like my woman cave, like stuff I didn't want my kids, my husband at the time to know anything about, you know, just my woman cave. Anything I went there. And so they had caught me on a day where I was sick and I was at the hospital. Now to back it up a step, he had came out and met us, her dad and I and her brothers, and there was something about him that, you were trying too hard. Like, oh, I love her. She's the greatest thing I've ever met. I want to be with her. It was just there was something about it that just was off. It was too sweet. It was too nice. He was trying too hard. And I know guys come out and meet girls dads, especially, and they can be intimidating or whatever, but it wasn't that. So she announces they want to move in together. Now, had I not been where I was at that day, I would have said no. That was sentimental to me. So they end up moving in together. That's the end of July of that year. The next thing I know, about 2 weeks later, she announces, she says, "Oh, I'm going to get married at noon." I didn't believe her. I didn't believe a word she said. I said, "No, you're not." And I
She said
laughed.
she was. She said she was going to get married. What?
She was going to get married at noon. And I didn't believe her. I thought, oh, she's just joking. Because that's the thing she said. No, she did. She went and got married at noon. And then I felt bad. I was like, I should have been there. We should have been there. Why? And the only thing she said was, I didn't want anybody to stop me. I didn't, because at this point she's in college and she is starting to, because she was going into the nursing program. And one of her disciplines she had picked is my father in law had dementia and had died, and she wanted to be a hospice nurse. Now you got to think about that. To be a normal RN, you have to be disciplined. It's very difficult. You have to pass this test. But to be a hospice nurse, you may be the only person that person has at the end of their life. No friends, no family, a whole different compassion. And she worked at Easter Seals at the time in Evansville in the homes of the mentally challenged adults. So she had these two things going on she wanted to do. She originally wanted to be an attorney because she loved Mariska off Law and Order SVU. And if anybody ever watches this and has a connection to Mariska, please contact me because I would love to bring her in. Um, but she would have been a good attorney because she loved to argue and she loved to debate. And I would always tell her, you can do all that, but you will never beat me. And we'd laugh about it. But they got married. And the one thing her dad and I both said to her was, just because you're married doesn't have to change your direction and your goals. Please make sure you don't stop doing what you're doing because you've gotten married. That doesn't determine your success, your journey, nothing like that. So,
Why? Why do you think there was such a big push for the two of them to get married so quick?
I think he said all, I think she liked the idea of being in love. I think he said all the right things. He's over here on refugee status. So if he's only on a status and he doesn't have a green card, you know, you get married, that kind of saves you to a degree. I think he wanted to convince her that he was this person because she's seen the good in everybody. So he wanted to convince her. He didn't want her to think twice about it. I think she loved the idea of being in love and she wanted this perfect life. And in my opinion alone, I think he said the right things, and she just seen that and the newness to it. And because I I think if it had been somebody else and it was a normal like the other boyfriends, that wouldn't have played out that way. And so they get married, and about a month goes by, and she calls me, and I'm working the business we had, and I'm in Evansville, Indiana, and she calls me, and she knew where I was at, and she said, "Hey, if I come by, can I take you to lunch?" That was the first thing. That was the key indicator right there. We ate lunch all the time, but I always paid. And I said, "Yeah, that's fine." And where we were going is somewhere everybody loved. And her dad and her brother was coming to where I was at. And I said, "Well, they're going to be here in a little bit." And she kind of acted nervous, but I just didn't think nothing about it. So we're eating and we're talking. And she said, "Well, I just want to tell you about something." And she wouldn't tell me. So they leave, and she's talking, and she said, "Well, I had this doctor's appointment," and she's going through it. And I said, "Chloe, just tell me how far along you are." And she says, "Well, I just found out." And I did ask her. I said, "Was you pregnant when you got married?" And she said, "No." And I've tried to tie the timeline together. And she knew I wasn't going to be mad, because she knew I love babies. And I said, "You got to tell your dad." I said, "I'm not telling your dad. You got to tell your dad." And she cries a little bit. And I said, "You have to tell him today." So she leaves where I'm at and she goes to him. But before she gets there, he calls me and he says, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Everything's okay." I said, "But you need to be understanding when she's coming." And, and I said, "I'm not saying no more." And she tells him, and he was happy about it. Everybody was happy. However, what I didn't know, and I would later learn, um, after her death was um, he only wanted her to eat certain things, wanted to follow their regimen of food. He had made remarks to her friends who did not come forward until after the fact that as she's going along in this pregnancy and stuff, and she had a very difficult pregnancy. She had issues with preeclampsia and other things going on that he outright told her and told the friends. He said, "Well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to kill her and have the baby anyway." And they thought he was joking. So as we're progressing through her pregnancy, and we get to what would be March of 2018, she's living in this duplex that's my mother's, and we have a baby shower, and she says he wants me to move with him to his sister's house in Owensboro. Now Owensboro, like I said, is about 20-25 minutes, depending on how fast you drive. And so we went back and forth, back and forth. Now, in saying this, we get called over to this duplex, and he tells us, he's like, "I don't really want to be married. I don't want to be married to her. It wasn't done the correct Somalian way. We didn't ask permission. I just don't really, I'll take care of the baby, but I just don't want to be married." And I don't know how it went from that comment to the next thing I know, she has moved in with him with the sister. When I say this duplex they moved into was small, it was so small that it would fit into the duplex that she lived in that was my mother's. Um, I left the duplex like she left it. I didn't put my stuff back in it because I had it, it was all furnished and everything. She had brought her own furniture as well. So, and they'd moved mine out and put hers in. When she left, I didn't move anything back in. What was left there was a big futon, like a college futon, and a big chair recliner. So I left that there. And that was in March. And they both worked, well, I should say the sister and him worked at one of the local plants around here. Now, when they met, he was actually a phlebotomist that worked at the hospital in Owensboro, but then he ended up going to a hospital in Evansville. What was found out later was he didn't just switch jobs to go to this plant. He actually got fired for harassment, stalking of patients, people that worked there. That he just kind of creeped them out. But that wasn't revealed at that time. So they would leave to go to work at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, no later than 1, and wouldn't be back till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And she would immediately leave and come to Henderson. So the only thing she did in that duplex was while he was there, she slept. And that was it. So as we're moving along for her child to be born, she's not, and I'm asking her certain questions like, "Do you have this? Have you done this?" She's not telling me that he wants her to breastfeed. That's why there's no stocked different milk. There's no certain things. She's not saying that. And she's having a difficult pregnancy where he's not going to appointments. He's not attending appointments. She's kind of married, pregnant, and single at the same time, if that makes sense. So they're moving along. He's born June 14th, but on June 13th, she has to go in to be monitored. And what it was is the baby was breech. And there was a miscommunication when she gets to the hospital. And so they're supposed to be inducing her. And I just happened to say, "Wait a minute, the baby's breech." I mean, I don't understand because I guess that mattered if they tried to induce and she was breech, there was an issue. And so she was going to have a C-section the next morning. And by that time, the baby had turned. However, it wouldn't have mattered because the doctor, when everything transpired, he said it wouldn't have mattered if he turned anyway. The umbilical cord was wrapped numerous times. It would have been an emergency C-section. There was various things that happened with that where, he didn't want the child fed with a bottle. He wanted her to breastfeed. He wanted his traditions. Now, when it's time for her to leave the hospital, he looks at me and says, and he calls me and he says, "I need you to take her home. I don't want to be woke up by this child. I don't want to be disturbed or anything like that." So she ends up going back to the duplex that was my mother's that had no furniture, had no nothing, with her two brothers her two younger brothers, rotating times of coming in, making sure she's okay, staying there, making sure there's food, in case she falls asleep, doesn't hear the baby, something like that. He does stay a couple days, and after that, he's back to the sisters, and they're not together. So once she had that baby, they were not together. They're inching along. He's being very difficult. He wants the child. She's not going to give her child up. It doesn't matter what you're telling her. We get to the fall of 2018, and unfortunately, what my mother-in-law, her Mimi, had a very traumatic wreck that ended up in other health issues happening, and she ended up in hospice. And he called her at that time because Chloe was one of her favorites. She was a girl. She was the youngest girl. That was her favorite, and he was wanting Chloe. No one is aware at this point because she's hiding it that he's abusive to her, that he's hitting her, he's slapping her, he's mentally abusive, nothing. She's hiding it pretty well because to know Chloe, she didn't take anything from anybody. But for whatever reason, she's hiding this fact that he is. I don't know if she's embarrassed. I don't know if she's ashamed. I don't know. But he caught her at a time where her Mimi's in hospice. She's about to die, and he's trying to convince her to sign away her rights to Slim and pay him $500 a week. I mean, he's pressing, and she didn't. Thank God she didn't. Thank God she didn't let that play out because unfortunately, a lot of women that plays out that way. They feel like they're forced into that. So we get into 2019. There's some like I'm starting to think, okay, what is going on with you, Chloe? Because Chloe was always really responsible with money. She loved purses and she loved perfumes and certain things, but Chloe was very responsible. And she worked at Easter Seals lots of hours and she made really good money. We're watching Slim. Now we're co parenting to a degree with him, but he doesn't know that because, the child's coming to us. There was a babysitter, things like that. I remember her saying to me in the end of January, she's filling out paperwork for insurance and life insurance, and she says, I hope this is enough if I'm not here. And I don't catch it. And later I think back to that day. I think she knew. I think there had been things said to her and done that she was preparing. So we get to February. February's our birth month. We shared that 1 week there of where her birthday's one day, my birthday's 8 days later. So we did this almost 9 days of in between Valentine's. We're going to celebrate it. We always did. And we did. We get to March, and this is March 2019. And she had gotten a tattoo for her and her dad. I am because you were. And his birthday was March 12th. She had gotten it, I guess, in honor of his birthday, but she wanted that tattoo. And then as we're moving along, there are certain things happening. Like he's trying to take Slim from her. She's working, she's going to school, she's trying to. What I didn't realize is I'm questioning her because she's asking me for money. And I'm like, I don't understand. And she's telling me, oh, I just bought too much, I spent too much, I wasn't paying attention. And to me, that was out of the ordinary. Because, like I said, Chloe was very responsible. Well, what I didn't know was she was paying his rent, his bills, got him into this apartment and all that, and she wasn't paying hers because she was asking me, and I'm giving her money, thinking, okay, what is going on? So we get to the week leading up to Saturday would have been March 23rd. This is 2019. And she's being very vocal about things are going on. You don't understand. He's not as perfect as he's trying to make himself out to be. He's this, he's that. And in my mind, I had caught on to things, but I'm still not thinking, okay, this is happening to my child. I'm just not. And so we get to Wednesday, March 23rd on a Saturday. We get to Wednesday, and she takes the baby to the babysitter, but she also calls the police. And the police advised her, you you know, if you give him back, he can do the same, but if you keep him, he can do the same too. And the babysitter,
What did she call the police for?
she calls the police because he's following her. and she's wanting to keep the child away from him, and she doesn't know what to do. And if anybody knows any, the police is going to advise you, okay, at this point it's a civil matter unless you have papers from the court stating that you have him all the time or he has him all the time. But the rule is you're both the parent. So if you keep him from his dad and he eventually gets him back, he can do the same to you. So
And they're still married at this time?
they're still married. They're still married because he's the one that filed for divorce. I think in Chloe's mind, she didn't want to be a failure. She didn't want this marriage to be a failure because, Chloe was always successful in anything she did. And I think she thought if she failed, that people were going to look at her differently. I don't know. And I will never know why. But they're still married. He's the one that filed for divorce. She was trying to go to school, be in the nursing program because she entered the nursing program, work, and co-parent. She didn't want to be with him, but she's not the one that filed for divorce. So she makes that call to the police. The baby stays there with the babysitter. I end up picking him up that night. No, he picks him up that night because the next morning, Thursday, I'm like, where's Slim at? And she says, oh, I've already taken him to the babysitter. And I said, okay, I'll call her. And I call her and she said, well, I haven't seen him. And I call back and I said, where is he at? And that's when she reveals, well, I didn't want him to start anything, so I let him have him. And at this point, I have not had a conversation with him, the husband, um, at all. We've not had conversations for months. But I do call him, and he allows me to see Slim and talk to Slim and whatever. And he tells me, he says, I'm taking him to the babysitter. Okay. So that night, which is Thursday, so that would be the 21st of March, I pick Slim up from the babysitter, and we have him at home. And her dad gets this weird message from him and says, do you have him? And he replies, yes, I do. And he says, okay, that's fine. You can keep him. You can stay there. You will always be his grandparent regardless of what happens. That's exactly what he said. So now we're on Friday. And Chloe showed up really early to get him, like 6:30. And we were awake. Normally she didn't until about 9. And she said, no, I'm taking Slim. I'm going home. Where I lived and where the duplex was, we were right around the corner. And I just thought it was really odd because normally she had a certain time she was there, but she picks him up. Then about 8:30, 9 o'clock, the phone starts just burning up. Where Gabriel, that's his name, is calling, wanting to know where Slim's at, and I'm like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't want to. And so we end up at the duplex. They are in a verbal altercation. I remove the child. Her dad's in there talking, and he says to her, well, my uncle is in town. He's a truck driver. And he had never at this point ever talked about an uncle in truck driving. He always talked about an uncle that was a doctor in Boston. This elaborate lifestyle he had. And I tell her, I said, you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to leave this house. I said, but if you are insisting on following him, don't go with him. Drive your own car. So they end up together. They end up arguing. Somehow or other, there's no uncle. That was a fabricated lie. He ends up with Slim. Chloe had to work. But what he does is he's taunting Chloe. He says, I'm taking Slim. You're never going to see Slim again. If you want to see Slim, you have to pay for him. And they're taunting. He's taunting her. So as the night goes on, he's saying, or the afternoon into the night, he has this attorney out of Owensboro, the one that was helping him try to convince Chloe to give up her rights and paying $500 a week. And I don't have much of an opinion of that attorney because I just, he does women in other situations I've observed terribly. And so end up having a conversation with him, and he's not at the, because Gabriel was telling Chloe, I'm at the courthouse, I'm terminating your rights, her not realizing that you just can't do that. She's upset, nervous. So as the night goes on, it's a circus. He's Facebook living, he's filming where he's taunting her, calling her all kind of derogatory names. Everybody's like, what is going on? He hides Slim overnight. There were some other things that went on during the night involving her dad and her brother with him. Early morning, without me knowing, she goes and files an emergency protective order. And the family court judge at the time here was Judge Sheila Ferris, who I have great admiration for. We have, a great professional relationship now. She denied it. Not because, okay, let's blame the judge. Because Chloe, and as I explained to my victims now, you have to be detailed. Why do you want this EPO? Are you in fear of your life? Are you scared? Are you scared for your. And she didn't. She wasn't directed properly by the police officers of what you can and can't do. I wasn't there. So it was denied. At some point around 7:30, we're on Saturday now, March 23rd, 2019, she has a conversation with her dad. I'm unaware of this conversation because I was so ramped up and upset from the night before. I leave and I'm doing our business. We had something we had to do that day. It was a Saturday, so I just went to do that. 9:24, Chloe calls her dad, and he is also doing a job with one of her younger brothers. And she says, I'm going to get Slim. He told me if I wanted Slim, I could come get him now, but I had to come alone. I couldn't bring anybody. Her dad says, I will go with you. And she said, no, he specifically said if you come, I couldn't, because of y'all's altercation the night before, you're back and forth. I can't. And he said, well, please, if you give me 5 or 10 minutes, I'm just down the street. I'll go and hide. And she says, no, Dad, I'm going to get my child. Chloe was going to get her child unconditionally. Regardless, I think she knew going into that apartment. And that's my opinion and my opinion alone. Anytime you hear me speak at any event, I always talk about 11 minutes and 12 seconds because that's how long they talked. And he hears her get there. And he says, as soon as you have Slim, I want you to call me and tell me you're okay. They both say to each other, I love you, I will, I'll call you in a minute. He hears her knock on the door. And I knew the layout of the apartment because we'd been in it. I knew the previous owner. I knew how it was laid out. A minute later, he gets a text and says, call, text, do not call. That is not something she would have said to her dad. She may have said it to me, but not to her dad. And I never knew she went to that apartment. And I can say this with conviction. Had I known, we'd have had a different outcome. We would have. I don't know till around 11:30 when her dad, Jay, calls me and says, have you talked to Chloe? And still at this point, I don't know. No. He just says, I haven't talked to Chloe. She went to get Slim. And Saturdays were usually her day off. And her best friend, Jocelyn, had kids too. And she usually hung out with her or they would do things. And I said, no. I said, she's probably with Jocelyn, And Chloe was still upset about Mimi dying and all of that. And she would go to the graveyard and see her all times. So I'm at a duplex, working on this duplex, and it's 11:30. And I leave that duplex and I go to my mom's duplex. And it was always a running joke about my mother being called Mother Hen. And I had a key, and I remember going in, and I remember that March day. It wasn't hot, it wasn't cold, it was the perfect temperature. And I go in, the TV's on, the food like she had cooked was there, like she's coming back. And I say, and even with my mom being gone, anytime I went to see Chloe, I'd always talk like my mom was there because I grew up in that duplex. And I said, where's she at, Mother Hen? Where's she at? And I remember thinking, dang, it's cold in here. And so I leave that duplex and I drive to Gabriel's apartment. And I kick myself all the time because when I come off US 60 in Henderson and turn onto Green River Road and I'm coming down and you make the turn, there's an apartment complex that sits right there. And I always look over there, and that day I didn't. Later, that's where her car would be found at that had ran from 10 o'clock-ish till about 7 o'clock that night. I'm surprised it wasn't stolen. It was running. It had her phone in it. It had her purse. Didn't have her debit card because he took it. And I would go, there was 3 sets of apartment buildings, different apartments. I turned into the middle one. I went to the third drive. The apartment was right there. I didn't see her car. I didn't see his car. So I thought, okay, I don't know what's going on. I go back to the duplex I'm working on because I'm at this point I'm like, okay, I don't know. I don't know. So around, I don't know, 3:15ish, I come to my house because I was taking her two younger brothers around 4:30 to see this Marvel movie. And I remember coming in, and Jay is sitting on the couch, her dad. Her other brother's sitting there. There's a laptop open on the kitchen table. And as soon as I come in, he gets up, goes to the bedroom. But my cousin Shelly is texting me going, he thinks something happened to Chloe. And I call her and I said, what do you mean something happened to Chloe? I just seen him. He's not said a word. I've heard nothing about this. She said, Kristie, he's been calling people all day long. He thinks something's wrong. He don't want to tell you. And so I walked back to the bedroom and I said, what is going on? He said, I haven't talked to Chloe since this morning. Something's wrong. Something's up. And I said, it's her day off. Maybe she's with Jocelyn. Maybe she's gone to see the cemetery. I had excuses. I did because I just, in my mind, I'm not fathoming something's wrong with my child. So I sit down at the table and I see the laptop open and I see all the messages of all the people he's messaging. The one message was to her best friend Jocelyn. And she's like, I can't find her. I don't know where she's at. Jocelyn had messaged Gabriel's brother's girlfriend. Now remember, in the beginning I said that's Chloe's friend. And I hope this is okay to say, nobody's offended. Jocelyn asked where she was at, and she said, and I quote, he's at the mall. She's just being a dramatic bitch. There's nothing wrong. And that's how it went. So I'm thinking, okay, what is, I'm still not believing something, this is Chloe. This is not going to, this is not going to play out this way. So I get them in the car and we're going to the movies here. And the youngest one, John Michael, says to me, there better be something wrong for all this trouble everybody's going through. And that's when I realized there's something off. There's just something off. We get to the movies, we go in, we're sitting at the top. Like everybody else, I had Life 360. Chloe's somehow during the week had gotten turned off, and I didn't notice it until that day. And I'm watching my Life 360 because it's going off, and I'm seeing Jay move. And what I don't, and so I have my vehicle. His truck is in getting a new transmission. The business vehicle is at home, and I'm seeing him move, and I'm watching where he's going. Because my cousin Shelly and her son had came and got Jay, and they had went to the police station. And she calls me. It's 4:30, and she says, "Movie had just started." She calls me and she said, "Kristie, I need you to come to the police station." I said, "Okay." And I look at my boys and I said, "You are not to leave. There's nothing wrong. I need to handle something. You are not to leave." Her one brother sends Chloe a message and said, "What's going on, sis?" I go out to my car. I call my brother and I said, "I need you to meet me at the police station and I need you to do it now." I get there. I encounter him first. And I said, "I don't care what you do. You are not to bring them here. You are to go to that movie theater. You are to sit outside. There's nothing wrong. You act like there's nothing wrong, even if there is, and you are to take them home and you say nothing." The next person I encountered would be her dad. And he looks at me and he says, "I know he's killed her. I just need to know where her body is so I can go get her." And I said, if you remember me saying when I went in that apartment, that duplex, I thought it was cold. And anybody, and I always teach when I'm teaching the teen dating violence program, I always tell them, go home and ask your mother, go home and ask your parents when they sense something's wrong with you. And I said to him, I haven't seen the vision. I haven't felt the vision. I haven't seen it. But in fact, I had. And I didn't know to recognize it that apartment, that duplex was bone cold. The AC wasn't on. It was off. And he said, I know he's killed her. So at that was my other son, my oldest son, myself, Jay, her dad, my cousin, and her son. And one of the officers comes out and says, they've been caught in West Memphis, Arkansas. And we're about as confused as we could be. And they called the police on themselves because there was an individual with him that to this day, I'm not clear if that's his cousin or his friend or what. People thought that was Slim's father because he played a more active role. Now, remember, the friend tells Chloe's best friend she's just being over dramatic. The officer's out there telling us, okay, they've been detained. This is what's transpiring. I need y'all to hold on. About that time, a car pulls up. It's the friend because she has sent a message to Chloe's best friend to say something bad happened. Something bad's happened. She manages to get around us, and she's in front of the front doors of the police station. Luckily, there was another officer there. Jay says to that officer talking to us, she knows what happened and she's not saying anything. Her exact words was, he told us this morning he killed her. He killed Chloe and she's dead in the closet. And the reaction, you can imagine the chain reaction from her brother, who she fought with the most, was that officer had to grab her and was like, what are you doing? What? And this officer's grabbing my son and saying, son, please, you don't want to do that. So her father and her brother, because the crime scene is within a mile of the police station, they take off walking. I'm still thinking, okay, she's tied up in this apartment. She's hurt. At this, leading up to them saying Slim is with them in the car with this individual, I'm thinking she's with them. I'm still not conceding she's dead. Because in my mind, I didn't teach her that. So they take off walking. There's two officers that goes to stand by. He gets there. The neighbors come out. Now you have to understand, and I'll tell you in a minute. You're telling me you didn't hear nothing? Nothing. And I can understand people not wanting to come forward and not say a word. But you didn't hear nothing. So there's, some words exchanged between that upstairs neighbor because they're in a downstairs apartment. And the officers tell Jay, we can kick the door in. But if we kick the door in, everything that's in there will not be able to be used in court. Everything. And he says, I know she's in there. I know she's in there. So we finally made it to the crime scene. And it was me, my son Jason, Jay. The two younger ones have made it home. The cousin, the babysitter. And she's okay. So they come with the warrant. And they come with 3/4 of the police. And we were there. And somehow I got separated from the group. And I'm in direct line of when they kicked that door in. And I always tell people for the longest time, the sound of that door being kicked in haunted me because that door hit and bounced. And I'm in direct line. And when I tell you that apartment was tore up, it was tore up. There was a fight. And I seen the officer. He turned and he deadlocked. He deadlocked on my eyes, and I seen him, and I knew she was gone. And he shut the door. They had not came out and said it was her. I'm assuming this is okay to say. When the coroner got there and came out, he said, I don't know, I can't identify her because the amount of blood, because she had long black hair at that time, and it's matted. Remember, she has that tattoo. And Jay says, here's the picture. And at this point, he's in West Memphis. He's being questioned. My brother-in-law, who was an over-the-road truck driver, was 30 minutes within West Memphis, and he dropped the load he had, and he went to the jail. He's seen him be brought into the jail because he wasn't, when they called the police on themselves, and they thought it was some mental health breakdown situation going on. And so when they had him to come back to the police station, he wasn't under arrest. He could have fled, but he came back. Thank God he came back. And so those two are being detained. He's still holding Slim. So now it's flipped to, where's her car? Car's up the street. Her purse is in there. Her phone's in there. Not her debit card because he used it all day long. Because he later would be found that he went to Applebee's in Owensboro and ate and everything else, went to West Memphis. We didn't know for the longest why he went to West Memphis, but there was some 17-year-old girl there he was talking to. He was trying to get across the border. But when it came out that, she's gone and the brutality, now it flipped to where's her car? Where's Slim? We need to get Slim. And he would not agree to allow us to have Slim. And Slim went into foster care for 3 days. Luckily, one of the family members of ours was also a social worker and called and said, look, he's never been away. He needs to have the best care, whatever. She went into that apartment, and I 100% believe she knew, but she was going to get her child. And there was a verbal altercation. She turned to go down the hall. He took the claw of a hammer and he hit her in the back of the head twice. And he hit her so hard that when she fell, she knocked out her canine tooth and some teeth. And he hits her, 5 or 6 more times with claw of a hammer, flips her over, hits her across the forehead with a ball of a hammer. And they told me she would have lived, but to what capacity? But he cuts her throat from ear to ear, down to my knuckles. He likes about this much cutting her head off. And by his own admission and his own testimony, he stood over her body and watches her take her last breath. Keeps checking her. I had requested to go speak to him in prison. And I know everything he will ever say is a lie. And I don't need anybody to understand why I want to, but I do. I hope she never came to, and they have assured me that she never knew. I hope she never came to and begged him for her life. I hope Slim never clawed through that blood. I hope she never wondered why nobody came. Because I came. I was too late. Once she had died, he throws her in the closet and throws the weapons underneath her. He moves her car up the street. He then takes a shower where there's bloody footprints and handprints all over the wall, and makes the roommate friend put bags together. He claims he never heard nothing. He took Slim to a back room. Slim shows no signs of knowing that, and they fled. He tried to say that she killed herself, and I will never know, and I want to know. And he has not agreed to have a conversation with me, and he'll never agree. There's a stipulation to that. He wants access to Slim, and I'll never give him that because once he was formally convicted and this ridiculous sentence he got, we have legally adopted Slim, so I am legally now his mother, and her father is his father. Her right, unfortunately, it's listed that her rights have been terminated. She never existed or whatever. I have the original birth certificate, and he knows who Chloe is. That's Chloe in pictures, but he doesn't know. Here recently, he's asked questions. Did something bad happen to Chloe? Is that why we don't go see Chloe? You know, um, he looks like Chloe. He has the long, thick, curly hair like Chloe. He's got this perfect golden tan. He knows he's starting to realize, okay, mom, me now, looks like Casper the Ghost because I'm so white. And he's got this golden tan. I don't want to wait so long that, kids are cruel in school. And if they know there's one thing they can target you at, is at least my daddy didn't kill my mama. I don't want to wait so long that happens. But I also want to preserve his innocence. And I don't want that stolen from him because I don't want him to ever look at me and go, am I the reason my daddy killed my mama? No, your daddy killed your mother because he was a vile, a terrible person that didn't value women and their beliefs, and he couldn't control her, you know. I'll stop right there for a minute. That way, if you want to ask me something or if I need to go back, because I could talk for days. Um,
No, I really I wanted to try to have you tell that story as much as possible without me interrupting because I think it's important that I always think it's important to document things. Like that's kind of the whole point of one of the whole points of why I do this podcast is I want to
right.
document stuff. But I also think it's important that people hear the whole story in its entirety. Um, one question I have is what did his sentence end up being?
Well, at that time, our Commonwealth attorney was Bill Markwell. And Bill Markwell has been the Commonwealth attorney for, an extended amount of time. And Henderson, and this is me and my opinion, and Henderson didn't have a dominant presence for domestic violence. And they didn't talk about it, didn't exist. And he had never successfully tried a case like that. He has a high conviction rate because he always does plea deals. So
Because
in
they're always
Kentucky,
plaintiffs. Yep.
yeah, plea deals. She dies March 23rd, 2019. So we get to August of 2019 and we're thinking we're going to trial. And we're not. It gets postponed. And we're heartbroken. Gets postponed to December of 2019, at which point his attorney at that time, who's out of Owensboro, comes and says, well, we can do manslaughter in 10 years. No. So we don't take that at all. So now we flip to January 2020. And now you have the attorney says, well, I need to withdraw because he doesn't want me. And the judge says no. But if you don't allow it to play out, then you violated his Sixth Amendment right. So here we are getting ready to embark on COVID. And she finally does, because, if you don't, then you're gonna lose this case. So that attorney withdraws. He brings these 3 attorneys out of Louisville. And everybody's like, who's paying for this? What, So now we're postponed to July 2020. We're in the middle of COVID. We know it's not going to happen. Nobody's, Commonwealth attorney, he's not working on this case. When he finally decided to have a conversation, a real hard, in-depth conversation, was Good Friday was on Friday of 2021. So that was April. He actually had would come to my office, not the office I'm in, but the original CRO offices. And right off the bat, Marcy's Law was not in effect at the time. He didn't feel like he needed to keep the victims updated because we're victims too. We're victims of the victim. And so he wasn't keeping anybody updated, didn't feel like he had to. He just doing his own thing. So he comes out with, it's not the death penalty, because it had to be the death penalty had she been pregnant, had it been targeted at a police officer, a weapon of mass destruction, all of this. So he comes to me and wants to talk about her case. And I'm like, because I was like, you're coming to me because you don't want to have a conversation with her father. I will not decide anything. I'm all in that we're going to trial. Her voice needs to be heard for other victims to know that they matter and all of this. And he had never read her case. And I didn't realize that until he's sitting in my office and he can't even remember her name. He's calling her something else. And he says, well, what happens if we get a sympathetic juror? Okay, you're telling me we're going to get a sympathetic juror? I don't think so. And he's telling me, it could be a crime of passion. And I said, and at this point, her brother stayed at the crime scene while we were attempting to go to West Memphis to get Slim, which we got blocked and had to turn around and come back. He wouldn't allow her to come out without him there. He didn't want her to be alone. And people won't understand that statement, but even she's dead, but he didn't want her to be alone. So he says, well, do you really want to suffer through 2 more years? You want to suffer more? You've already suffered 2 more years. I said, I want to go to trial. We're prepared. I prepared everybody to go to trial. I didn't ID her at the crime scene. I was fully prepared that I was going to ID her at the crime scene. I knew I could do that. I had not seen any crime scene photos. I said, I want to see the crime scene photos. I said, this was on a Tuesday. Good Friday's on Friday. I said, I want to see the crime scene photos. I said, I won't answer any more of your questions. I want to see the photos. No, you don't. Yeah, I do. I've never seen anybody act so fast in getting those photos to me. And so he comes back to my office on Good Friday. He's always shows up when it was just me. Both those times it just played out that her brother and my husband, her dad, was there. Um, and he's still telling me it's a crime of passion. What happens if you get a sympathetic juror? And I hold this piece of paper up and I said, you're telling me, but you got to think about it. Her neck's almost cut off and they move her and this flips back. And I said, you're telling me that this is a crime of passion? I said, no. I said, I don't know. I'm not agreeing to nothing. He's not agreeing to nothing. Going to trial. That's how it is. So you might as well prepare your defense, whatever. We go all summer. Nothing. In August, I can't remember what it was called we went for. They brought in the detective from West Memphis. They brought in the detective from here. It was a hearing. And I can't remember what it was called, but they had
pre-trial hearing.
No, it was called something else. The pre-trial, it's something. It's something. I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was.
That's all right.
But when I say this, that was all just that was all, we were just playing it out. They had already made their mind up that they were doing a plea deal. Because see, in Kentucky, the family doesn't have to agree. They can take a plea deal on behalf, and we don't have to agree. And that's disrespectful. You're deciding the fate of our family, other families. They'd already made their mind up. They were going to do this plea deal. They weren't. They were just trying to BS us, thinking if they came and talked to us, we'd go away and we wouldn't have an opinion or nothing. On September 13th, 2021, that morning, I woke up and I was going to the office and I say, there's something off about this day. I don't know what it is, but there's something. And my office where I was at, I had a courtyard in the back, and I came in the back door, and front door, somebody was knocking on the door. And I open the door goes out, and it's Bill Markwell, and he's waving this paper, and he says, we got what we wanted. We got murder. We got murder. Because it was important that it's murder. I mean, you're going to list it as reckless homicide or involuntary manslaughter. No, call it what it is. He killed her. So he says, we got this. He says to me, we got 20 years for murder and 10 years for 2 counts of tampering with physical evidence because he moved her body and he moved her car. So essentially that's 30 years. It wouldn't have mattered if you gave him 100 years. I would have rather had her back. Kentucky law states there's no such thing as a life sentence. Life in Kentucky is 20 years. But if you took it to trial and you got life, and what they flopped it, he would come up for parole and they'd flop it. So those 20 years might turn into 60. So I say to this man, I said, I'm not telling you nothing. I'm not signing nothing. And I call her dad on the phone and I'm telling him. And he's talking to him and he's elated and he says, and we're going to sentence him in 10 days on September 23rd. There is no way that morning that you worked that out. You worked it out in August. You already knew what you were doing. And so leading up to that, her dad says, I'm not in agreement. I know. I'm not in agreement. No, absolutely not. So we get to this day, and I had already always said, I want to deliver the impact statement. I don't need to write it. I know what I'm going to say. I'm going to shoot straight from the hip. I'm going straight from the emotions, whatever. That day, we had a live feed. Not a live feed for everybody to see, but a live feed. 2 of my attorneys were on there. Other family members that was not here. We were under the impression that other family could go and be in the courtroom. At 11 o'clock that day, they were so concerned with security that they got everything worked out to where they got everybody. We were on the 3rd floor. 3rd floor is where I'm always at now when I'm in court. The only people that first they told me that it could only be me and my husband and not her brothers. And so then they allowed me and her brothers in there. The rest of them had to stay out on the street, the sidewalk, with the news crews that had showed up. And now his family, the killer's family, who's down on the corner, They were concerned there was going to be a riot. So what normally happens is you plead guilty. They bring you back 30 to 45 days because they have to assess what level you are, where you're going, what you're going to do. They bring you back, and then you get transported. That's not what happened. The prosecuting attorney says they're going to sentence him. He's going to plead guilty. They're going to sentence him. Do you want to do your impact statement? Do you have it ready? Or do we need to wait on you? I said, no, I'm ready. I got up there, and as I'm walking, I'm looking at my sons, and I'm looking at that live feed, and I hesitate. And I turn, and I see my one son, my youngest son, John, and he starts bawling. He had never showed any emotion at this point. He was the last one to eat with his sister. Never showed any emotion. And he started bawling, and it was on. It was a sign of disrespect because his attorneys would not let him look at me. They made him turn his back to me. And that was a sign of disrespect. He wouldn't even admit that he killed his wife, Chloe. He says, I killed her. Okay, who's her? The judge makes him say, my wife. Okay, what's her name? And I tell the judge, Judge Karen Wilson, I said, the family's not in agreement. We do not agree to this. This is wrong. Because they changed it. They said it was 20 years combined for murder and tampering with 2 counts of physical evidence. So now you're telling me he gets 10 years for murder and 10 years for tampering with physical evidence. Well, now that's a slap in the face. You've lied to me. You've lied to us. You've lied to the family. My children are back here crying. Dad, her father's emotional. There's people out there. There's people listening, and you've lied. I said, we don't agree. I said, you know what? He should have equally got the same treatment that she did. He liked this much from cutting her head off, and you tell me that's acceptable? No, it's not. What did you just deliver to other victims? You just told them that they didn't matter, and why are they going to come forward? They're not. And she had the opportunity to change it and kick it back, and she didn't. Okay. So what, I see her today, I can be mad or upset, whatever. He pled guilty, they sentenced him, and he was out of Henderson in an hour because he had caused so much issues at the jail. They had to keep him sequestered from Gen Pop because you had your normal people, your normal people there that's for drugs, for other things. They're going to kill him because you killed a female, a white female from Henderson. You're an outsider. So before I could get from the 3rd floor to outside, they done hit the news. Well, now the whole town's in an uproar. So how it stands is, he's over here on refugee status. He will serve out till, I think it's 2036. I check it regularly. Could be 2039. Then he'll be deported. If whoever's the president don't change that either. He'll be deported. Somebody will be waiting. I'm not naive to believe that he's not going to sneak back in. His brother and sisters are here. Now, by that point, Slim will be 18. I'm always in heightened security. I'm making sure Slim's fine, whatever. I just think the whole, but what was also said to us in September when he pled guilty was, well, I'm going to retire. We have to get this done because if we don't, then it starts all over. So you have to go through 2 more years. But who the assistant Commonwealth was my cousin, not Chloe's, mine. So if I retire and he does it, then it's a conflict of interest. So you still start over. To this day, that man is still actively in that office, even though there's a new Commonwealth attorney, Herbie McKee, who I work with closely, who I don't have an issue with, but that man still runs that office, and he's still doing cases. And the office they rent, the rent goes to him, and everything else. So it's just, it's just as shady as it could be. And he's still ruining people's lives and everything else.
I think it's important that you mentioned the whole plea deal and how a lot of these prosecutors have a crap ton of wins, but they're all plea deals.
They're all plea deals.
It's like that here locally. It's like that everywhere. And everybody is all upset about federal government this and federal government that. And everybody, has issues with whatever. Take your pick. But if if there's one thing that everybody should be pissed off about, it's our judicial system,
Mm-hmm.
specifically the elected prosecutors, and how they're able to get away with the crap that they do in an effort to say, no, look, I've been doing a great job. See how many wins I have under my belt in the time that
Yeah.
you've
He
elected
had
me
a
in this position?
98% conviction rate.
Yeah.
Okay. He will take anybody on a weed charge, drug paraphernalia. He'll take that to court and all day long. I mean, but I don't know if he was scared. He was going to get up against these 3 attorneys out of Louisville. They were pretty good. They were. He didn't even try. That's all we wanted. Try. If you fail and he gets out, at least you tried. But you failed. You failed your police department, who I have an awesome relationship with, Detective Jake Eisenhood of Henderson HPD, who, there were some other people that played a factor in this murder, like the sister, the brother, the girlfriend, the Isaac guy, that I feel like should have been charged. But they weren't. I mean, it's that little last thread to connect them that they're guilty. They played a part, but you got the person that really did it. But at the end of the day, I would change all of that to have her back. But you slapped your police department in the face. You sent a message to all victims and survivors of domestic violence that, it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter if you come forward. It doesn't matter if you say anything. I'm not going to do anything for you because I'm worried about my conviction rate. And that's what they did.
I have so many questions.
Go ahead.
I have so
I'll
many
go
questions,
first.
but
I'll
questions
answer
that
them.
can't necessarily be answered. It's most of the questions are at the parties involved in the legal side of things. But why do you think he murdered your daughter?
Because he couldn't control her. Because Chloe didn't need him. He needed Chloe. And, okay, first off, in that culture that he was in, they believed in multiple wives. That was never going to happen with Chloe. Chloe was intelligent. She was smart. She didn't need him. She chose him because she believed the good in everybody. She believed she could change him. He could come here, be a better person, and he couldn't control her. She was going to be a nurse and she was going to be good at it. And she loved her job. She was actually supposed to be a supervisor that Monday. She would have taken that position. He couldn't control her and he didn't like it.
And what how did you get through all of this? How did you get I don't want to say get through all this. It's kind of poor wording because I don't feel like that's something you could ever really get through. How did you get to where you are today?
She was murdered on Saturday. And after we could not go get Slim because he blocked it and said, no, I would rather him go social services, foster care, wherever. We immediately on that Monday started filing a petition to get control of her body. Because, see, they were going to be divorced on a Tuesday, but he's next of kin. He somewhat confessed he killed her, but he still controls her remains, which we got the law changed in Kentucky on that. Every state has what's called a slayer law. Um, and we petitioned the court for immediate custody of Slim, which had to go through the judge in West Memphis, the current family court judge here, Judge Sheila Ferris. They had to talk on that Monday. On that Tuesday, we went to West Memphis and got Slim from that court, and we brought him back. And it was the first time he ever said "mama." So that was, that was bad. That was bad and sad at the same time. We had court so let me back up a minute. Saturday night going into Sunday, my phone had got on airplane mode because I had finally fallen asleep. The last time I remember was about 2 o'clock. I wake up about 5:30. You know how you're awake, but you can't wake yourself up, but you're hearing stuff. I can hear um, her dad in there on the phone with somebody. He's crying. I can't. She's gone. He's killed her, which would later turn out to be our attorney. Um, Around 6:30, her brother Brecken would come in, and he's crying. And I said, "You want to lay down with Mama?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Where's your dad? Where's Daddy?" He said, "He's left in your car." Now, my keys always stay in my purse, and my purse stays beside me like I'm some old woman. I'm not letting it get away. And for him to get in and get my keys, you knew it was bad. I knew where he went. And I had Life 360, and I'm like, oh shit. And so I called him and I said, I know where you are and I know why you're there. I said, I need you to come back. I said, your sons need you. Slim's going to need, I need you to come back. When I got my phone on, because it got on airplane mode, I had 600 voicemails, text messages, phone calls, any kind of communication. 75 of those were from men, women, and teens. They're reaching out to me, asking me for help. I don't do anything because I can't even help myself at this point. I don't know what to do. That was on a Sunday. That's when my brother in law, Mark, shows up. He'd been in West Memphis. He shows up. He spends the next month with us doing whatever we need, whatever he can help with, whatever. So on that Thursday, we have to go to family court, the court I sit in now, we got emergency custody out of West Memphis. Now we have to get emergency temporary custody out of Henderson because we had to go to court. I'm up on this third floor. We walk up, we come off the elevator. It's us three. And the minute I come off that elevator, the whole floor turns. They're whispering, oh, that's them, that's them. I didn't like that. I walked down past the courtrooms where like the Coke machines and stuff are today and were then. And this lady's watching me and I'm watching her. And I'm really good about watching my surroundings. If something seems out of place, it's out of place. And I'm doing this, and my brother-in-law says that woman's watching you, and I said, I know she is. And she's kind of rough looking, she's got her arm in a sling, and she approaches me. And Mark stands in between us, and I said, what is she gonna do? What is she gonna do? And she raises her hand, she keeps going, I don't want anything from you, and you don't know me, but I've got to tell you this. I need to tell you. And I'm like, okay. And she says, I live down the street from where Chloe was murdered. And I've been beat up the past 15 years of my life. And she saved me. I need you to know that Chloe saved me. I don't want nothing from you. I just need you to know that. That gave me what I needed to get out of this situation. And she saved me. And they called her case and she walked in. Who her abuser was, I've known my entire life. And he walks up and he goes, hey, Kristie, are you doing okay? And I'm thinking, what the hell? And that was that defining moment. Them 75 people called me. She's telling me this, and this defining moment that if we don't do something, and I don't do something, Chloe's death's going to be in vain. Her death's going to be in vain. She's going to die. Something's going to happen to her, and all these other people don't have a voice. That was that moment I knew, and I took that moment and that energy, and I went with it. And that was my way to deal with it of, okay, I can't change what happened March 23rd, 2019. But what I do going forward, what this organization does going forward, because we're not exempt from domestic violence, we're not exempt from anything. It happened to us. Can prevent the next Chloe, can prevent the next family from ever enduring what we did, have, and always will. If we don't come together and do something, nothing's ever going to change. There was not a dominant force here. There was not Kristie Randolph here. There was not CRO here. I will never know in those final moments, days leading up to that event, had there been somebody that was vocal, would it have changed? Would Chloe have said, he's beating me up, he's slapping me, he's mentally, financially abusing me, can you help me? That didn't happen. So I knew that's what I had to do. And that's what we have done for 6 years. By no means are we perfect in our endeavor. We are learning, but it's something that her legacy stands for all victims and survivors to know that they have a voice and they matter. That you don't have to stand down for anybody. And all those types of abuse that I talk about to those teens and those adults, they exist with all those subcomponents. So I've taken that, and that's how I addressed it. Her brothers have addressed it differently. Her father's addressed it differently. That was his only daughter. And like with my father, I was his favorite. He can say whatever he wants. She was his. That was his only daughter. Like my sons. One of my sons was here when I started this. And it will always be that what if, how come, why not, and so that's how I took mine. And not everybody can do that. And I understand that, it's taken a toll. And I always tell people, I was never broken. I was on my last thread to be broken. And if the death of my daughter didn't break me, then nothing else can.
So how big is? Sorry, the sun is like right in my eyeballs now. How big is the Chloe Randolph organization now?
As far as, well, we have about 50 volunteers. Um, I'm the face of the organization. Unfortunately, Henderson does not believe, still to this day, that domestic violence is a dominant force. They don't believe mental health, homelessness. Um, we're working towards having some full time and part time more um, and employees. We're working on. Henderson doesn't have a shelter for domestic violence. That's something we're working on. So my answer right now is I have to send them to another state. Okay, they're not going to go. I've got them to trust me now. They feel like I've lied to them. So we're working on a shelter. We have Chloe's Closet, which is the free mission store. Everything's free for all victims and survivors of domestic violence. But there are certain times we allow other individuals to get things. We're not punishing you. I do what is called the Safe Dates program for teen dating violence. It's about healthy versus unhealthy, prevention over intervention, because domestic violence in teens starts as early as sixth grade. By eighth grade, it's ramped up. We do ninth grade freshman health classes because they all have to take health. By high school, the pattern's already been set. They've been in two or three situations, and oftentimes they're a product of their environment, so they think it's normal. We've started the empowerment program. It's the red flag program for employers to identify domestic violence in the workplace, whether their employee is the abuser, the respondent, or the victim, the petitioner. Domestic violence awareness, education has grown. I 100% believe had her death happened, maybe it needed to happen. I don't know. Had it not, we would still be. It's like going through that tunnel 25 years ago. We're not like Owensboro where they address everything. We're here in this town that if we don't talk about it, don't exist, it makes us look better. No, it doesn't. It just makes you. It doesn't draw outside people. It doesn't draw businesses in. It doesn't draw growth because you don't want to address any of your issues. You just want to live in, you know, yesteryear and hope that it doesn't happen to you. But if it happens to you, that's a whole different story.
What's the future look like for CRO? What would you like to see with that program?
I would like, we're getting ready to take, I've always followed Henderson first and then our outside counties. I won't turn somebody away if you call me from another state. I'm going to find you a resource and I'm going to help you. But I've came to realize that there are some people that are never going to support domestic violence. They may not support CRO. We have to grow beyond them. So we are. We're branching out to all of our counties. We're growing with our other judges, our other counselors, or other things. That's fine if you don't support me. You didn't break me. You won't break me, and I'm not going away. You may want me to go away. That way you don't have to, think, oh, well, you're just being over dramatic, or it's really not that bad, or we can't do this. That's fine. But you will not break our spirit. Um, her legacy matters. All the others that have died due to domestic violence, whether you're male or female, your voice matters, and that's what's important. Her legacy will live on through those, and her voice lives on. And I always say, this is the house that Chloe built.
Do you see CRO growing into other states?
I would love for it to. I really would. I talked about every state has a Slayer law. And what that is some have been changed, some are still antiquated. And he killed her. He's still our next of kin, so he can dispose of her body he sees fit. If he wants to burn her, bury her, do nothing, he had that right. Luckily, he did not exercise his rights. He had 5 days. He didn't exercise it, but he didn't waive it. I am working on taking that to other states. I have an in Oklahoma with Detective Jason White, who I met and is one of my dear friends that came to Henderson. I love him. Everybody loves him. I have an in Oklahoma. I just found out I might have an in West Virginia. Of course, all of these laws are going to have to be researched, and I have to have somebody to present it. I would love to do Illinois, Indiana, Tennessee. I have an in Florida. I would love for us to be a national organization, and that's something I'm looking into. Um, because I think it matters. I think it should. Domestic violence has been around forever. It's just how we handled it. We thought that was normal. You know, um, Somebody asked me yesterday. They were like, was your parents abusive? I was like, no. I said, but I guarantee you my grandparents were, you know, talking about, and my great grandparents, they had, they were farmers. I said, I guarantee you they were. I guarantee you they slapped each other, were verbally and mentally abusive, and went about their day because that's what life was like. You know, I have never been myself targeted to me involved in a domestic situation. Um, Unfortunately, we're not immune from it. It can happen. Um, and sometimes people put you on a pedestal and think, oh, you're this, but in reality, we are everyday reality in life. And, we took something that was a gap and turned it into this gap of services. We've done statistics and research and all of that. And so I would love to see CRO nationally. I would.
I may have somebody we could talk to for Indiana.
All right.
I'll have to dig into that one a little bit. May have a couple people actually.
I went to, I've never flown until 2 years ago when I went to San Antonio, Texas, twice on the same flight from Southwest. I thought I was dying on the flight. I wasn't. I'm sure I'm on TikTok somewhere because that girl was filming me. Like, what the hell? But I flew. First time I went in for my own conference. Second time I flew to the same spot because Jason White was there for the Texas Homicide Convention. And my conference was like, we were going to be there kind of the same day. I flew in a day and a half early so I could eat dinner with him again. And I have met some wonderful people in Texas out of Dallas, but we were in San Antonio. So I've gained a lot of connection there. I think they're a really, and I might have it in Texas too. So I'm hoping maybe Indiana because that's right here. So I would love to get 4 of them started. One of the things also is in this endeavor, I have got my own stalker, and I want to, yes, my own stalker. It's been going on for about 3 years now. And EPO doesn't cover it. You know why it doesn't cover it? Because it's not a domestic. We weren't dating. We didn't have a sexual relationship. We weren't related. Just he knows me. I know him. Um, I don't even know what it's about. I don't even know. He drives by my house. The organization dislikes us, whatever. I'm also working on changing the stalking law involving that because stalking is very prevalent in domestic violence, but also outside of it. So yes, I am dealing with my own stalker.
That is wild.
Yeah, yeah.
At this point, Jason has hooked me up with a lot of people to talk to, a lot of people that have shared some really amazing stories. I think we're gonna have to just plan some event or something and meet out like in the middle of the
Absolutely.
country, just all get together.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
Kristie, I greatly appreciate you sharing your story, sharing your daughter Chloe's story. I think as something as horrible as that situation is, obviously something beautiful has come out of it with CRO, and I think this program is, you know, has already saved lives, but has the potential of saving even more lives. And
We're trying. We started this mission and this endeavor. Some may want us to go away because they don't believe domestic violence exists, but I'm not going away. If anything, it just ramps it up more, charges me more. I will talk about Chloe's story all day long. I love talking about her. And I hopefully telling her story helps somebody that may feel ashamed or embarrassed to come forward, or a family member or friend that's watching somebody in it and is like, I can't believe they would be abusive to you, so I'm not going to say anything. You're doing them an injustice. You really are. Um, so I implore to you that if you are a victim or survivor of domestic violence and you're listening to my voice now, please reach out to me. I will help you find a resource, or me. Or if you are a family member or friend that is convincing the victim that that's not happening, just give them another chance. You are wrong for that because one day that's going to affect you, and then something's going to happen, and you're going to have to live with that on your conscience. Um, you don't understand domestic violence, ask questions because domestic violence is just not physical. It is mental and verbal and emotional, sexual, spiritual, financial, and psychological. And any victim will tell you that they would rather be physically abused. And I know it's hard to believe, because you can recover from a slap, a punch, a kick, a bite, and it's a routine at 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever, and they go about their day. But when you're in a mental and verbal, it's all day, every day. You're stupid. You're ugly. You're a deadbeat. I can't believe I'm with you. And you start to believe that. And it takes a long time to recover from that. And so you have your 8 types of abuse, but then you go into your subcomponents. And, stalking and strangulation are very important factors of that. And you have your drug addiction and all of that. And I could go on for days, um, but I won't. But I just need people to understand that, we sometimes look at our friends and our family and we think they possibly couldn't do that. They can, and it happens. And like I said, domestic violence doesn't skip me to get to you. I'm just as easily targeted or whatever, and we're not immune from it. We just have to learn from
It's
it.
very well said. Kristie, thank you again for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Uh, Definitely appreciate it.